Hello and welcome to the PTA Global Interview Series, where we have taken the time to interview PTA Global co-founders and contributors, but more importantly, the co-founders and contributors are offering their time to be able to pick their brains again and be able to learn from them as a continuous learning journey through the PTA Global community. I'm Dan Duran, representing PTA Global here, and I am really excited today to have Mr. Paul Taylor as our interviewee.
Morning, John. Top of the morning to you from Australia. That'll confuse people, an Irishman talking from Australia, and it's first thing in the morning.
Regardless of the accent, it's a great accent. So I wouldn't have even known it wasn't Australian or Irish. I can't tell the difference. All I know is I like it, and I love the way you say now, N-O-W, nigh.
Yeah,
I
now.
love it. Nigh, I love it.
Hi now, Brian Kai.
Oh my gosh, yeah. We'll stick to the words we can understand. Paul, thank you so much. And I just want to let the listeners know a few things before we kick things off. You're all muted, and that's just so we don't get a lot of background noise. That being said, you do have the opportunity, and I encourage you to ask questions. You do that by typing into the box that says questions, not the one that says chat, but the one that says questions. I will see those. You'll see me glancing over to my left as they come in, and we'll maybe answer some as we go. Definitely answer them at the end. Okay. There are some downloads. You'll see something that says handouts. Download the documents that are in there. Here's the great news. There's no exam for this webinar, so you don't have to take notes or study. You might want to take notes, but you don't have to study for an exam. And but you will receive a certificate at the end of this. So with that, thank you all listeners for tuning in now and in the future. And Paul, can you tell us a little about your career journey and how you started and what you're doing?
Yeah, okay. So my career journey has been pretty eclectic, really. I spent 8 years in the British Armed Forces, and there's an unusual start because I'm an Irish Catholic who joined the British Armed Forces. There's not many of us in there. So I spent 8 years flying in helicopters, doing anti-submarine warfare, hunting submarines, doing helicopter search and rescue for a few years, did combat survival, resistance to interrogation training. And then I left the armed forces and moved to Australia. So I had a complete career change. But fortunately, before I joined the armed forces, I had a degree and a master's in exercise physiology. So my secondary roles were always sports officer or something like that. And then when I was doing helicopter search and rescue, I knew I was leaving in a few years. So we had a lot of time sitting around waiting for the buzzer to go off. So I rather than play video games, I did another master's in human nutrition. So I finished that, left the armed forces, moved to Australia, and I set up as an exercise physiologist and nutritionist in a big, massive PT studio. A guy called Craig Harper, who's another PTA Global contributor. And so then I was doing one-on-one stuff, and then I started to do corporate stuff. And then Craig got me a gig doing a lecture for a company that certified personal trainers. So I went and did a couple of lectures for them. Then they offered me the role of senior lecturer. So I took that up and then realized actually we need to spruce up the content a bit. And that's when I got introduced to Richard Boyd by Craig. And so he put me in touch with some of the guys, Ian O'Dwyer, Bobby Capuccio, Michelle, and I created a brand new cert called Personal Training Academy. Actually, at this stage, I started my own registered training organization. We created PT Academy, and then later did a sort of a deal to integrate some of that into PTA Global, right? And then so I ran PT Academy for years, sold that, and just became more and more corporate stuff. So now I'm a corporate speaker. That's 90% of the stuff that I do is corporate stuff. I've also got some software, BioAids, that's used in a number of gyms, but I'm really about corporate stuff, and I run leadership and high performance and resilience workshops in the corporate sphere. So it's a little bit of an unusual career pattern.
Well, and I know you've heard me say this before, but I thank you for your service, regardless of
Thanks,
British
man.
or American. It doesn't matter. You put your life on the line for others and for their freedom. So I thank you for that. Now,
And I'm sorry, I would just say something I did say to you is that Americans are amazing in the way that they treat their military personnel. You get nothing like this in Australia and nothing like this in the UK. Like when I first went to America and seeing all the respect for the military people, and then on a plane they board them first. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And you're at a conference and somebody says they're military and they say, oh, thank you, and everybody claps. I'm like, this is really cool. Like you guys get it. So I think that's really cool thing about American culture.
well, that's good to hear. It's great to hear. And on that, when they say, current and past uh, members of the armed forces, or however they say it on the airplane, they don't say what country. So
Mm.
it's
Oh, so I could jump in.
yeah, heck yeah, boy, I sure would because we everybody owes you for that. So thank you very much, Paul. It is an interesting career journey. I mentioned to you in an email. I'd love to chat with you and just pick your brain more about what you did with the military. It sounds fascinating, but we're here to talk about personal training and we're here to talk about coaching. Um, and for those of you that are tuning in, if you don't know this, Paul teaches the brain and behavior change in the certified personal trainer course that we offer. It's phenomenal information, very in-depth information on all of the parts of the brain, what they each do, how they work together, and how that influences behavior, and how we can help folks basically change behavior by adding behavior or modifying it. And that's certainly what his expertise is in. Now, being that you started in fitness, for lack of a better word, you
Yeah,
had the education in it and what we call personal training. I have a question for you that I've asked all of our contributors and co-founders. When you started, I'm just going to venture a guess that it was over 20 years ago, but somewhere in
yeah.
there. When you started, there were probably traits or
Mm.
characteristics or education, something or more than one thing that really helped make that coach and trainer successful in building their business. My question is, what things were important 20 years ago that remain important today? What hasn't changed?
Sure. Look, what hasn't changed, I think, is that people need a certain level of technical knowledge, right? Otherwise, they'll be useless. So that's a permission to play. And but then what I've observed over the years is that there are a lot of trainers who do course after course and have an amazing amount of knowledge, but don't have a successful business as people with less knowledge, but who have a greater ability to connect. And I think that for me is the thing that I've observed over the years is that the people with the more successful business have an ability to connect to humans. And one of the, we take it back to Harper's personal training. It had over 30 personal trainers in there. Some guys with amazing technical knowledge, but the guy with the best business in there had one of the lowest technical knowledge, but his guy called Christian, but he was amazing at the interpersonal stuff, right? So I think that is consistently that ability to connect, and I think the one thing that hasn't changed is the ability to also influence behavior, because I think every single trainer out there is a behavior change coach. And like, how many clients ever come and say, you know what, I just want to stay exactly like I am, and if you can make me stay exactly like I am, awesome, right? So it doesn't, people want change in some way, shape, or form. And it's not always, every trainer in the world will know that you can tell people what to do, and if it's within your remit, tell them what to eat, and if they follow it, and they'll be successful, and show them what they exercise and what to do at home, and if they follow it, they'll be successful. Same like physical therapists, they'll give you rehab exercise, they know if you do it, you'll be successful. It's about the doing and the consistent application. So for me, I think we're all, and more as we go forward, fundamentally behavior change coaches.
Oh, I love it. And this obviously was, we didn't prep for this question in advance or discuss it, but again, for those of you tuning in, you know that that is what PTA Global hangs their hat on, is we are about the relationship building, the connection.
Mm,
That is what will build your business, and behavior change. Of course, like I said, that's what Paul teaches. He and Bobby contributed a lot of information on the brain and behavior, and that's ultimately what it's all about. So that being said, Paul, thank you for that. Now, let's think about today, and clearly you're not planning on retiring anytime soon. You're just getting started probably.
yeah,
You think of the coaches that maybe are getting started right now,
yeah.
or early in their careers, and they want to build their business over the next 5, 10, 15 years. What would you say to them? Maybe it's the same, maybe it's different. That there are the things they need to polish, to add, to
Mm.
focus on, to be better at, to sharpen, to be successful moving forward.
Yeah, it's pretty similar to what I said. They need to have technical knowledge and have a continual quest for knowledge. Once somebody thinks they know everything, they're finished, right? So having that continual quest for improvement will help in two ways. So number one, it's going to help your business because you're going to increase your skill base. But number two, it's going to help you with longevity in your profession because it can then turn into a passion. And it can then also turn into your purpose. So, and we're going slightly off piste here, as I tend to do, but there's a lot of people struggling with purpose in life, and purpose is really your passion combined with service to others. So if you can combine those two things, then you get a really strong sense of purpose. And so part of that is turning what you're actually doing into a passion. And part of that is about continuous improvement and feeling that you are continuing to grow. Um, and so when you increase that knowledge and that skill set and augment that technical stuff with the behavioral stuff, then you are going to be able to influence other people. You're going to start to recognize patterns in people's behavior and know, okay, here's a tool from my toolbox that's going to help this person to be able to affect change. Therefore, they're going to be more successful. So they're going to stay on longer as a client and they're going to give me more referrals. Because the way to build a really successful business is through referrals, and you get referrals through actually having an impact on people. So that's a very long-winded, circuitous kind of answer to your question, but I think that is the key to building that business.
That that was a profound statement, though, and I made notes on that one. Passion plus service equals purpose, and I absolutely love that, Paul. You say something that I like to share with our listeners, and that is that we want to keep adding tools to our toolbox, and that's your technical knowledge. So,
Yeah.
so what you're saying is keep adding technical knowledge so that you have more tools to be able to pull out of your toolbox, because that's going to be the service component. Add passion, you have purpose.
Yeah,
I love it.
and actually, we use the analogy of the toolbox. You know, the old toolboxes, Dan, that you pull them apart like that, and then
Oh
there's
yeah.
you got one side and the other in the base. So for me, all the technical stuff is on one side, and all the interpersonal skills are on the other side. So the behavior changes on the other side. So if we use that metaphor, I'd like everybody to and in their head open their toolbox right now and look and see, is it a balanced toolbox or is it massively loaded on one side, right? So trying to have that balance in that toolbox, I think is really important.
Oh boy, excellent stuff. Excellent. I can see some great video bites that we're going to be pulling out of this, and that's a big one right there, Paul. Thank you for sharing. Now, let's jump now into, what you're doing now
Yeah,
and what we really geared up for, which is, the psychophysical resilience to stress, which I think we can all agree we're experiencing at a level that we were not expecting
yes,
4 months ago. We've had some
yeah,
curveballs thrown in. So with that, you're doing a PhD right now on your PhD on resilience. And
yeah.
what is it exactly, and what do we know from the academic literature? What have you learned there? What can you share?
Yeah, so look, it's pretty interesting when you dig into the whole concept of resilience, and mine has morphed a little bit into resilience and cognitive fitness. Um, so cognitive fitness, and I'm working with the Australian Defence Science Technology Group, who basically um, develop stuff for the armed forces, right? And looking at how to enhance cognitive fitness. So cognitive fitness is the ability to perform under pressure, and it's very strongly linked to resilience, right? So typically, again, if you take the armed forces, but it's not just limited to that. We often wait until people become affected, and in the armed forces, that's often PTSD, anxiety, depression, post a period of prolonged stress. And then we try to treat that, right? And those who are more resilient to stress tend to get less of that. But what they've actually realized is that you can enhance someone's ability to perform under pressure, and therefore they'll get less damaged when they're exposed to long-term stress. So when we look at resilience, resilience typically is about the ability to bounce back from hardship, right? That's what it looks at in the academic literature. And the academic literature is still arguing about whether it is a state, a trait, a process, or an outcome, right? So we can pick those apart, whether it is a state as in I'm resilient right now, whether it's more of a behavioral trait. So Dan's resilient, has been resilient all his life, and so it tends to be a personality or behavioral trait, or whether it's a process that you can actually build resilience, or whether resilience is just that outcome that you can actually withstand stress, fall down 7 times, stand up 8, that old Chinese saying. So I very much sit in the camp that I believe that it's a developable process. But again, when you look at the academic literature, it's not well measured. It's basically to ascertain whether someone's resilient, we use questionnaires, and there's a number of different questionnaires that are out there. So I'm actually looking at, as part of my PhD, trying to create a triangulated measure of resilience, which means, yes, we have the questionnaire, but can we connect that questionnaire with cognitive fitness, your ability to perform under pressure? And then the other side of the triangle, there is a biological correlate of resilience, which is an acoustic startle response, right? So what on earth do I mean by that, right? So you've got headphones on right now. What we would do is have you sitting doing a word processing task, and then randomly over the period of 20 minutes, there would be loud noises come into your headphones, and you'd be like, oh, right? And we measure your, we have a pulse oximeter on, we have skin response, we have heart rate response, blood pressure, and we're measuring your physiological response to that acoustic startup, which is a stress. And we can measure it. And what we have found is that the individuals who score high on the questionnaires on resilience habituate to that startle response. So after 5, 6, 7, 8 times, your body habituates and you have less of a physiological reaction. But we know that people who are low in resilience or suffer from anxiety, depression, or PTSD still get the same startle response, right? So that's what we call a biological correlate. It's something that we can measure in your biology. So what I'm trying to do is triangulate those. So the short answer to your question is, in the academic literature, it's reasonably weak at the minute. It is either state, trait, process, or outcome, or a combination of them. It's questionnaire based, but I'm trying to make it more rigid.
Wow, that sounds fascinating. Sign me up. I'm happy to be one of your test subjects, as long as we're not putting electrodes on or something like that. Although that could be a little bit of fun
That's a
too.
prerequisite.
That probably goes back to your interrogation training.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah,
Get to turn the wheels.
yeah, but if you told us, you'd have to kill us, so we have to keep that, under wraps.
That's it.
So now you call, the topic of the webinar is psychophysical resilience.
Yeah.
So I believe what you're talking about, and I really love that state, trait, process, or outcome, is what you were referring to, I believe, is more of the psycho part of that word. What
Yeah,
about the physical part of that word? How does that tie
yeah.
in?
So look, it's again, I was pretty shocked when I looked at the academic literature, and particularly around enhancing resilience, at the lack of physical training component in that, because you look at intervention programs, and it's all mindfulness stuff, and cognitive behavioral stuff, which for me is necessary but not sufficient. And I'm what I call a pracademic in the area of resilience. So I sort of came into that with this whole practical experience of having gone through military training and combat survival training, right? And what happened post combat survival training, I had my first epiphany. So it was 10 days of pretty hardcore stuff. It was in the UK in winter, when it does get cold, not like in Australia. My fellow Australians are saying it's cold. I'm like, it's not cold. But we had no sleeping bags, and we had 10 days where we got the life thrashed out of us physically. So I think we walked somewhere between 350 and 400 kilometers in those 10 days. And the only food we got in those 10 days was a chicken between 4 people, and it was alive when we got it. And we had so little sleep, partly because we were doing night navigation exercises every night. But then you get back, you get in your Gore-Tex bivy bag, which is just, that waterproof thing, no sleeping bag. You'd be so tired you'd fall asleep straight away, and you'd wake up about 5 minutes later shivering your ass off because you're so cold, right? So monstrous amount of sleep deprivation. The second 5 days of that 10-day block was escape and evasion, sorry, where we were hunted by a hunter force who had helicopters, dog teams, and vehicles. And then at the end of it, we got interrogated for between 12 and 16 hours in stress positions the whole time, exposed to white noise at the volume you'd hear music in a nightclub to massively disorient you. And it was pretty horrible at the time, right? But afterwards, about 2 weeks later, I noticed that there's something that happened to me that I would normally have found reasonably stressful, and it was just like water off a duck's back. And then something else happened quite similar. And then I started asking everybody else on course, have you noticed this? And they all say to me, yeah, actually, I've noticed it. And that's when I realized, now, having the benefits of doing a master's in exercise physiology, I really understood exercise. And exercise is really only good for you because it's a stressor, right? It's the stress of exercise that stimulates adaptive processes to make us bigger, faster, stronger. And I'm like, I think the same thing is happening here, with that psychological / emotional response. And then, so I dug into the literature expecting to see lots of this, nada, nothing, other than the only thing that I could find are links. So when they expose rats and mice to intense physical exercise or cold stress, and they actually become less anxious. Now, and there's one research paper I found around cold water immersion, actually enhances people's resistance to stress from hypoxia. So what they'll do is, we'll take me and you, we'll do a training session on a bike. Then you do the same thing, but we're in a chamber where they reduce the amount of oxygen, and they can measure our physiological stress responses, which increase. But then they submerge us in cold water for 5 minutes 3 times, and repeat again. So you're being submerged in cold water, I'm submerged in normal 35-degree water, so we know it's not placebo. And then we repeat, and you actually respond better. You have less of a stress response, right? So, and I think we're going to see exactly the same thing, and that's part of my PhD. Is I'm working with a bunch of military guys, and they're getting a training protocol, and they're being assessed at the start, getting a psychophysiological training protocol, and then reassessed at the end. So for me, the physical stuff is what the military have recognized for over 1,000 years. The British military have been around for over 1,000 years. The fittest soldiers seem to be able to handle greater emotional and mental stress. Right? Now, we know from the research on sports psychology that athletes who are able to handle more stress, more what's called have a higher discomfort tolerance, are able to do better physically, right? So everybody gets it. All the sports sites get it, that discomfort tolerance is what defines the best of the best from the best of the rest. That those amazing ones can handle more physical discomfort. But for me, it's the other way around as well. That when you do intense physical exercise, it's a stressor, and it's the same stress hormones that are released when someone's feeling anxious. So what we know is that anxious people actually have a lower discomfort tolerance when it comes to physical stress. Anxious people actually tolerate intense physical exercise less. So there's a number of lines of converging research that would suggest that actually, well, let's just flip it on our head. Let's train people to tolerate harder intensities, higher intensities, high intensity interval training, that sort of thing, and will actually improve their ability to handle psychological stress.
Wow. And I always thought that my ability to handle stress was just no brain, no pain, right? But
Yeah.
apparently there's more to it.
Yeah. It is. Yeah. It helps you doing it if you don't have an amygdala, right? But it is about discomfort tolerance. Really, is the main thing. And so when you're doing more intense exercise, when you're busting out those last few reps, it's discomfort tolerance that helps you through that. But if we think of the physiology, it's stress hormones that are being released. Now, your brain does not differentiate between real or imagined stress and between physical and psychological often. So what I often say is that our brains are amazing, right? We could have a conversation right now about metacognition, which is the fact that you can think about the fact that you can think about stuff, right? Think about that for a second. That's a high level brain process. But this amazing brain is a double-edged sword in that we are the only species whose thoughts can activate the stress response. So that means that you can sit here right now and ruminate about some bullshit that happened 20 years ago, or an argument you had with your wife or your kids last week, and you can create a stress response as if you're being chased by a lion. You can also catastrophize about what someone might be thinking about you, or whether your kids are going to turn out all right, or whether you're going to have a job at the end of COVID-19. And that is a psychological process, but that can create a stress response as if you're being chased by a lion. So there is this intimate connection in the brain with stress where physical and psychological emotional stresses are kind of blurred. And I think we can take advantage of that and assist people to build their psychological stress through physical exposure and increasing discomfort tolerance through exercise, cold water exposure. In lots of companies that I work, I'm known as the cold shower guy. So I encourage everybody to have 30 seconds of a freezing cold shower at the end of their normal shower to increase their discomfort tolerance. And there's a couple of other things that fall under that umbrella. Breath work is another one, and a whole heap of types of breath work that are physical mechanisms that can influence your resilience or your predisposition to stress. So breathing is a form of arousal control when done correctly. And we can
Wow.
dig into that if you want later, or we can just let it sort of set aside.
No, this is all fascinating, and I think there's a lot of directions we can go. I definitely want you to steer it, and the viewers out there. So again, type your questions. This is a heck of an opportunity, if you haven't noticed, to speak to someone with an amazing amount of experience or to be able to ask questions of them. So go to that question box and type them in there. I'm going to just throw this in. This is really about you, your experience, your research, and how people can take it away. I usually don't tell anything about myself or personal stuff, but I want to just throw in a similar something that I've noticed. This is my second career. I think folks that actually know me know that. My primary career was law enforcement. So I went through a militaristic police academy. Then I ran an academy before I retired, and went through specialty scuba training, swiftwater rescue, etc. So it was very physical and mental to what Paul's speaking to. And then here in my later years, in my 40s, I started doing ultra endurance events, so multiple Ironman events. Did a quintuple Ironman, so 5.5 days of triathlon nonstop.
Oh.
And what I've come away with is it's truly a mental game.
Mm,
When you're doing, that kind of distances, it's really your mindset's going to keep you going. Hopefully
mm,
the body stays together. I say all that because when I used to train people in law enforcement, when I went through it, when I started doing these, I have a very firm belief that the more you can challenge yourself physically and emotionally in a controlled environment, the better you respond to a physical and emotional demand in an
mm,
uncontrolled environment, which is what we call
absolutely.
life.
Yeah.
So absolutely love that. And it's a brilliant topic. I love what you're working on. Definitely want to hear how this turns out. There's a lot of folks, not just the coaches and individuals and leaders that can benefit from this, but certainly people in public safety, in first responders, military,
Mm,
no doubt. So this is exciting stuff. I'm seeing some questions coming in. I love it, and it looks like we are going to circle back around to breathwork, Paul. But before
sure.
we do that,
Yeah.
um, but let me ask you this for the common person, and if there is such a thing, but for our listeners out there, for maybe the clients they're coaching, are there some tools that you could share, some things that would be applicable that they could utilize in their own lives or in their clients' training that
Mm,
could assist them with this psychophysical resilience at a, at a,
yeah.
at a, at a level that we could apply?
Yeah, so absolutely. So the couple we've touched upon is the exercise and helping people to just increase their discomfort tolerance with exercise. Right now, something on that. Um, so I've trained a number of clients, as you have, as lots of people have. Some who seem to be comfortable with higher intensity, some who are not. Now, often this is to do with a variant of the BDNF gene, that if people have one variant of it, they have negative emotional experiences with high intensity exercise. What the research has shown is that for those type of people who don't like the higher intensities, allow them to set the intensity and then encourage them just to do a little bit more and a little bit more, rather than you setting the intensity and then giving them positive feedback around it. It takes them longer, but they eventually get there. So for some people, they need coached along and being given a bit of autonomy in that selection of the intensity. So that's the physical stuff. The cold showers I talked about, really, really important. And just encouraging, having all the guys do it first and then talk to your clients about it, right? And breath work, which again we can get into a little bit later on. But then there's a number of cognitive tools that people can use. And one of the most impactful ones is I like to get people to create a characters in their head, right? So everybody listening here, you, me, everybody listening, can relate to a version of them, a version of you that's a little bit shit, right? Excuse my language. So that crappy version of you that is whiny, plays the victim, negative self-talk, all of that. This is what I call your inner gremlin. And what I want everybody to refer to from now on is their inner gremlin, right? And we all have an inner gremlin sitting there. Sometimes it pops up more. It loves situations like this where there's stress and uncertainty. Your inner gremlin is all over this, right? And so that's the negativity. The inner gremlin is the one that's the negative self-talk that tells you you're not good enough, but also it's like a chameleon. It plays the victim as well. Why are they doing this to me? Why is this happening? Why is my business being screwed, right? Why is the government doing this? So that inner gremlin is really not helpful. And this is where Stoic philosophy, which I'm a big fan of, Japanese psychology, and acceptance commitment therapy, which is a form of cognitive behavior therapy, probably the most successful for stress and anxiety and depression. This is why they all are in agreement that everybody's in agreement. Some people try to change it. It's just accept that it's there, but choose not to pay attention to it. It's when you pay attention to your inner gremlin that it becomes bigger and more powerful. And it's like the movie Gremlins, if anybody's old enough to remember that. When you feed the gremlins, they become energized. And we feed our gremlin by paying attention. So the other side of you is awesome you. And that's what I like to call your inner sage or your inner warrior, right? So the Stoic philosophers, the ancient Greeks and Romans, they would call this your sage. And this is about creating the best version of yourself. And then I like to give that best version of yourself a little sprinkling of steroids, right? So I might say, I know Dan, I've known Dan for years. I love the way Dan is calm under pressure, or I love the way he's an empathetic listener. I would like to have more of that character trait. So in the exercise that I give people, they write down all the character strengths that they know they have. So when they're being their best, and one or two more that you would like to have more of, right? So I will write my inner sage is calm under pressure, is an empathetic listener. And then it's about visualizing that, right? So every single day, every one of us, me, you, and all the listeners, gets to choose who's in control. Every day when we get out of bed, we have the ability to choose what version of us is going to go and interact with the world. Every time you're faced with a challenge, and be it some prat in front of you or COVID-19, we ultimately get to choose whether our inner gremlin runs the show or our inner sage runs the show. So a really useful strategy for people will be is just when they find themselves stressed or the negativity is coming, just say to yourself, thanks, gremlin, you're not being helpful right now. And you mentally put your gremlin in your pocket and you say to yourself, what would my inner sage or what would my inner warrior do right now, right? So that's one of the most impactful tools when I run workshops that people say is just brilliant. And I get them to draw them, and my get your kids to draw them, do it with your kids, right? And when you draw it, you kind of bring it to life. So that's one of the tools. And look, I've got a whole laundry list of tools, but I'll maybe just do a couple more. One is gratitude. So McCulloch in 2002 did a meta-analysis, showed that people who regularly practice gratitude have more positive emotions, they got higher levels of well-being, they have more hope and optimism for the future. And we can maybe come back to that. But they are more empathetic, they're more forgiving of people who wrong them, they're less depressed, they're less anxious, they're less materialist, and they're less envious, right? Now, you think of people who would like all of that. Well, you know what? That stuff's free, completely free. And Martin Seligman showed just 2 minutes a day of gratitude is really, really important. So that regular gratitude, and if you got a family or partner, sitting down at the dinner table, talking about what you're grateful for, right? And then the third thing I would say is to try to be a silver lining hunter, right? And that means that's a cognitive reframing process about finding the silver lining in the dark cloud, right? So what I'd like everybody to do is think of a bad event or a bad time in their life, right? And where you look back at it and you go, I never want to go there again. I never want that to happen again. So what I want you now to do is to find the silver lining. What good came out of that negative event down the track, right? And it doesn't have to be directly linked to it, but it has to be that if that bad event didn't happen, then this event couldn't have happened, right? So quick example, 2001, I was in Ecuador. I ended up getting mugged, being AWOL from the armed forces. Pretty bad day, right? But later that day, I met somebody who I'm now married to, right? So if I hadn't got mugged, I probably wouldn't be sitting here right now, because we ended up moving to Australia. That's where I started my new career. My 2 kids would not be alive if I hadn't got mugged. Now, I didn't know it was a silver lining at the time. It was a year down the track that I knew, and mine's pretty obvious. But often people will go, well, hold on a minute. A loved one of mine died. Where's the silver lining in that? Well, how often have you heard people say that when a loved one died, they lent on someone else and they developed a much stronger relationship? Or their parent died, they were battling with their sibling, and they thought, you know what, life's too short, and they actually threw it away and just rekindled that friendship or that relationship. So sometimes it's really hard to find, or often people will say, you know, that thing afterwards, that thing that I felt that I never deserved, I realize now that life is too short, so I just went and did it. So even in the toughest situations, there's often a silver lining. And James Gross has shown that people who suppress negative events, a lot of us deal with negative events by suppressing them, by just not thinking about it, distracting ourselves. He said they do not do anywhere as well in environmental mastery, positive relationships, life satisfaction, and self-esteem as people who reappraise the negative event, who say, yeah, that was bad, but here's the silver lining that happened. Here's the good outcome. And so you can, let's make this practical. It's COVID-19. It's a shit show, right? It's shocking for everybody. But you can say, okay, what will the silver lining be? So for me, you know, my business just disappeared over the course of about a week. Corporate speaking, there's not a lot of that going on. There's no conferences happening, right? And so the silver lining, you know, and still you pivot and do what you can. So I'm moving into the online space. But the silver lining is I got more time to spend on my PhD. I got more time to write that book that I've been procrastinating about. And I'm spending more time with my kids. So I'm going out for a run every day with my little guy, right? And we actually sat down and said, let's redo our family values. And we use that time to do it. And you know, some of it being healthy, exercising, and helping out others. And a silver lining that's come out of it is that my little guy, who's 10 years old, has decided that every week in lockdown, he's going to run the equivalent of a marathon to raise money for a foundation over here called the Smith Family Foundation, which is about disadvantaged kids. Because Oscar, as we were talking and doing the family values, he said, oh, there's kids out there who are doing it tougher than me, so I actually want to do something. So one of those, you know, think about what is a silver lining. You can manufacture a silver lining, and then it's about focusing on that silver lining. That's key. So they're probably three right off the bat of psychological tools that will augment the physical tools of exercise, cold showers, and breath work.
Wow. So gremlin versus warrior, gratitude,
yeah,
and the silver lining. I absolutely.
And you know what? Be a silver lining hunter. I got two mantras, actually a third one that I use right now, which might be useful for people. But one is get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Two is be a silver lining hunter. And the third one that I've added recently is, and it's actually from reading this book, meditation. Can you see that? Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. So Marcus Aurelius, for those who don't know, was a Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, and he's called the last of the great Roman emperors. But Marcus Aurelius actually said to himself, Memento Mori, and it's written on my bathroom mirror right now, Memento Mori. Remember that at any point you could leave this earth, at any point you could die. And Marcus, he wrote it not to be morose or negative, but to remind himself that life is a gift, and to remind himself that when he wakes up every morning, to have amazing gratitude for being alive, and that life is a gift, and that he shouldn't waste his time. And linked into that, so that's written at the top of my bathroom mirror. At the bottom is written carpe punctum. And a lot of people have heard of carpe diem, which is seize the day, but it's pretty hard to seize an entire 24-hour period. But we can seize moments, and that's what carpe punctum is about. Seizing the little moment when you find your gremlin is in your head, to actually be your inner sage or your inner warrior instead. Seizing the little moment when there's negativity, to actually say, what's the silver lining?
Wow. Paul, you might want to, there's something, your camera froze, turned off. You might need to turn it back
disappeared.
on.
You've just disappeared. Oh, there you
I can still hear you. There you are. There you are. So we've got a pile of questions. I thought I was boring you,
Dan. I thought you just turned off.
Oh, heck no. I can listen to this all day.
This Irish guy.
No, I'm actually, what I was thinking is I'm gonna ask my wife to watch this recording. This is just phenomenal, and I can see so many ways to take this and apply it and teach our son, and utilize these techniques in our family. So very, 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 very good stuff. Brilliant. I see a lot of questions here, and so one of the first ones that came in that we already talked about is the breathing techniques.
Yeah.
Could you touch on that a little bit before I jump into more questions?
Yeah, sure. So look, I'm a big fan of breath work, and this is all about the vagus nerve and the phrenic nerve, right? And so when we're stressed, it's top-down control of the vagus nerve. So your amygdala sets off the alarm bells, when there's a stress, either real or imaginary, and your hypothalamus then stimulates your nervous system. The sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system fires up. Your heart beats faster, your blood pressure goes up, your breathing gets faster and shallower. All the blood that is in your digestive system digesting breakfast or lunch is shunted away to the working muscles in order to create that muscle pump. And what we also know is your immune system's temporarily suppressed. Your reproductive system is shut down because there's no point ovulating or creating sperm when you're being chased by a lion, right? So all of this stuff happens in an instant. What we now know, it's only taken us scientists about 3,000 years to catch up with the knowledge of yogis, that certain breathing patterns affect your heart and your brain. So we know that if you slow your breathing down, do something called box breathing, which is a great introduction for people. Breathe like the sides of a box. Breathe in for 4 or 5, hold for 4 or 5, breathe out for 4 or 5, hold for 4 or 5. Breathing like that. Or another 2 types of breathing I'll give people: 4, 7, 8. In for 4, out for 7. Sorry, hold for 7 and out for 8. Or one that's really, really strongly linked to your heart rate is around this resonant frequency breathing. And you can get it tested, but for the vast majority of people, it's either 5 or 6 breaths a minute. So if we take 6 breaths a minute, that's easy to handle. Breathe in for 4, out for 6, and just repeat, right? That actually maximizes your heart rate variability. And I'm sure some of the guys have heard of heart rate variability and how we need to optimize that. So what all those breathing things do is they work on the vagus nerve and the phrenic nerve from the bottom up. So they actually reduce your blood pressure, reduce your heart rate, and bring your brain out of a stress state. So when you're stressed in your brain is in high beta wave. Anxiety is just super high beta. So when you have somebody who is feeling anxious, and my wife is a coach on this, and part of acceptance commitment therapy is doing exposure therapy, getting them to feel anxious and then getting them to breathe in these patterns. And you actually bring your brain out of beta. And if you do it for 3, 4, 5 minutes, you can bring your brain into alpha state, which is what the great psychologist Csikszentmihalyi talked about, the zone or flow state. And I know some of you guys will know about flow state, and you can induce that through breathing. So a lot of people don't like meditation. Lots do, but some particularly, and from certain religions, whether it's Christian or Islam, say, oh no, that's Buddhist. Well, actually, it's not really. But for those guys who don't like meditation, breath work, just breathe, man. And really, part of mindfulness meditation is focusing on the breath, and it's just the attention. Really, meditation can be relabeled attention training. But when you do it on the breath, for me, that's meditation on steroids, because you're actually manipulating your physiology. So that is some of the breath work that I like to use with people. And all the executives I work with, I say, every half hour, if you can, at least every hour, get off your butt and do 30 seconds of intense physical activity. Get blood flow and oxygen to the brain, switch those genes back on, and then sit down and do 1 to 2 minutes of breath work, whether it's box breathing, resonant frequency breathing, or the other one. This is like taking your brain out and plugging it into the wall to get a recharge.
Oh man, this is great stuff. Thank you for that. And it was Kim who asked more on breathwork, please. So Kim, hopefully that's what you were looking for. It certainly met my expectations. Let's see. Ryan asks, does building up your discomfort tolerance affect things at a cellular level, like altering mRNA and such?
I'm glad that Ryan asked that question. Look, this is a rabbit hole. So when you are exposed to any type of stress, be it physical or psychological or cold stress, whatever that may be, stress response proteins are released. So these are a family of proteins, heat shock proteins. And things like heat shock protein 72, heat shock protein 90. So these are, and I like to translate the science, that these are your guardians of your cells, right? So what they do is they get inside your, or they're like the janitors as well. They get inside your cell and they actually clean up the damage. So proteins inside your cell that get bent out of shape, with any type of damage, DNA damage, cellular waste accumulation. What these heat shock proteins do is they go in and they rebend those proteins back into the correct shape, which is pretty cool stuff, right? And then they hang around the cell to protect the cell against further damage. But Frank Booth, the legendary physiology professor, showed in 2005 in a research paper, and the name of the paper is Exercise Controls Gene Expression. And he showed that every time you are exposed to stress, there's what we call a triphasic response of your gene expression. So the stress response proteins are released first, and in proportion to the intensity of the stressor. They then trigger another wave of genes called metabolic priority genes, which are a whole heap of genes that just make your metabolism in your body and your brain function well. And then the third wave of gene expression is your mitochondrial enzyme genes. So your mitochondria, I like to say they're like the batteries of your cells. All of your cells, probably apart from red blood cells, have mitochondria. When you get damaged mitochondria, you get premature aging and disease. And what these genes do is they repair that damaged mitochondria. And then afterward, that lasts about 24 hours. Afterwards, there's messenger RNA that creates adaptive responses. Now, when you expose yourself to cold water, not only do you get the heat shock proteins, but you get the cold shock proteins. So, which are independent and synergistic to heat shock proteins. So what I think it was Ryan who said, yes, there is, not only is there messenger RNA happening, but there is significant increases in gene expression triggered by stress response proteins that then have a whole other effect, and then messenger RNA happens for remodeling. And that's how I think the adaptive responses. So if we take this to exercise, that's how you get bigger, faster, stronger, is because it's stressful. So the only, and there's lots of people I've worked with, I don't like exercise because it's uncomfortable. It's supposed to be bloody uncomfortable. That is why it is good for you. It is the stimulus for adaptive responses. So hopefully that answers the question. Resounding yes to Ryan's question.
Man, thank you, Ryan. Yeah, that was absolutely brilliant. Let's see. Yes, he said, Ryan says, wow, didn't expect that. Thank you. So I'm going to say you met and exceeded our expectations on that. Miriam asked the question, how do you overcome that obstacle or wall people put up where they're afraid or resistant to discomfort? What would be the one starting piece we can use?
Yeah, look, so the thing that I would say with that, Miriam, is talking about virtues and values. And again, I'll bring it back to the Stoic philosophers. Is that Marcus Aurelius said that when you meet an immovable object, a challenge, it is an opportunity to practice a virtue. So Epictetus said everything in your life is in two zones. Zone one is the stuff that's within your will or within your power. Your belief systems, your attitudes, your thoughts, your behaviors, your actions, how you choose to react to your circumstances. Everything else is zone two, right? So if we, and he said, when you're faced with challenges, you need to focus on what you can control and refuse to invest your energy in that which you can't control, right? So focusing on what I can control is my thoughts, my behaviors, and how I'm choosing to react to my circumstances. So number one, it's understanding or sitting with the client and saying, well, this is a choice right now. And this is an opportunity for you to develop a virtue or a character strength. Whether that is resilience or equanimity or persistence. So I actually, when I'm working with clients, and particularly my wife does more of the coaching, when she's coaching, we really sit with people and identify what are their key values and virtues. And a lot of people have never done this, and actually helping them with that. And then saying, okay, well, here is an opportunity to develop this particular virtue or value that either is really important to you or that you would like to have more of. And I would use it as that. It's an opportunity to sharpen your character.
Wow, I love it. Great stuff, Paul. I'm going to just get a couple more so that we can try to finish on time. We try to keep it definitely at an hour or less. So many great questions here. Wei Ling asked a question, and it's something I'm not familiar with. Wei Ling says, do you recommend cold showers for people who have Raynaud's syndrome?
Definitely out of my scope of practice. Not even
Okay.
going to go there, not even going to pretend, not even going to bluff you. I would need to go and look at it. If there is, I'm not familiar with Raynaud's syndrome. If it is prone to any sort of cardiovascular, if cardiovascular stress can affect it negatively, then I would say no.
Okay.
That would be my answer without knowing much about Raynaud's syndrome.
Perfect. And that's we stay in our lanes, and that's one of
Yeah,
a
absolutely.
huge takeaway, and you're modeling that right now. But Wei Ling did ask a second question, which I think we might be able to nail here. He asked, what is your favorite book that offers great coaching techniques?
Oh, I don't I don't have a book that offers coaching per se, because my wife does more of the coaching. So anything on acceptance commitment therapy would be something that I would say is really useful. But if you want techniques or thinking patterns that are really useful that you can turn into coaching, I would say the Little Book of Stoicism. Where's it here? Oh, here we go.
Yeah, when I ask you that question, I see that library behind you, and I thought this could be a tough one.
Yeah, the Little Book of Stoicism. You can see it here by Jonas Salzgeber, right there.
Excellent.
That's probably one of the most accessible books that I've read on Stoicism, and gives a whole heap of practices that anybody could really turn into coaching methodologies.
Excellent. And I may get this name wrong. Robbie asked the same question. What 1 to 2 books would you recommend? So I assume that's going to be one of them.
Yeah, so that and anything actually on, and I don't know why I didn't think of this at the time, but anything on motivational interviewing. I'm a massive fan of motivational interviewing. I think I did some stuff on PTA Global, which I'll sum up by getting the client to tell you what you want to tell them.
Exactly. Let them provide the solutions and hold them accountable. I love
All
that.
we got to do is be the guide by the side, not the sage on the stage.
Brilliant, brilliant. Let's see. Ravathi says, no questions, just loving this webinar. Thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in, Ravathi. I'm loving it too. I'm going to finish with one final question. Charles says, how do you differentiate between avoidance of negative occurrences and not feeding your gremlins? So avoidance.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's, and again, I'd need a bit of a two-way conversation to start. Avoidance of negative, what did he say?
Differentiate between avoidance of negative occurrences, which I'm thinking maybe situations, negative occurrences, and not feeding your gremlin.
Yeah, so with the gremlin, I'm not saying that you have to avoid negative situations, because everybody needs to live. So Viktor Frankl said, when we cannot change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. So it's not about avoiding those situations. It's about, and particularly if there are situations that you need to encounter to grow, It's about facing into the situations and knowing that your gremlin is there, but actually putting your gremlin in your back pocket and bringing out your warrior, right? So using that, turning the obstacle into the advantage of whether this is a very annoying person that you practice tolerance or something like that. So there's a difference between the situations and the actual gremlin. The gremlin gives you the interpretation of the situation. The gremlin takes that situation and creates meaning behind it, and often drives behavior. So it's not about avoiding situations per se. It's about choosing how you react to those situations, and that's the important thing. And if your gremlin, now sometimes your gremlin is right in avoiding, I'm not going there because that person's coughing and sneezing. That's when you want your gremlin, right? Or those people look really threatening, they might be about to mug me. That is when you listen to your gremlin. So your gremlin has a role, but it's when your gremlin is not serving you that you need to put it in your back pocket, right? So we're not trying to kill the gremlin. We're just saying, not your time, buddy. This is not your time.
Oh,
So
I love it.
that would be my answer to that. Now, Dan, sorry, I would just say before you wrap up, because you'd asked about some sort of offer, and I'm getting a coaching thing ready.
Yeah.
What I'm happy to do, if you guys want to facilitate it, is I'm happy to run an hour-long webinar on my psychophysiological responses to resilience, and give people the tools to deal with what are pretty stressful situations that they can jump on, that they can bring some of their clients on. I've got Zoom account with up to 500 people. So if PTA Global wants to offer that, then I'm happy. If people want to do a deep dive, bring on spouse, couple of clients, that sort of stuff, we can set it up at a time that kind of works.
I think that would be brilliant, and I'm already seeing people saying that would be awesome. I'm interested, so that is on our to-do list, Paul. And by the way, I was ready, and now I got to see if I can keep this together. But in response to Charles's question about avoidance of negative occurrences or situations, and you explained that you're not necessarily avoiding them, you're taking them on. Choosing wisely, of course, but you're taking them on. And I was going to add that what you're going to then do is you're going to hunt the silver lining, and you're going to be grateful for it.
Awesome. I love it. Pulled it together beautifully, Dan. You're like the conductor. Geppetto, the puppeteer.
Well, that's only because you make it all so easy to understand for someone of my intellect. So thank you for bringing it to my level, Paul. Definitely at my level, and I am old enough to know the movie Gremlins. So with that, to be respectful of everyone's time, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. I will follow up with you, Paul, on your offer. What I would ask, if you would, is you're the guest of honor here. I want to thank all of the folks for tuning in, for coming and joining us in sharpening your saw, and basically preparing for battle. I like to say, we're gonna prepare. You are on the front lines of a world that needs more exercise, it needs healthier living, it needs more nutritional foods. We've all can think of someone in our lives who either left us too soon or experiencing things that they shouldn't if they'd made some changes in those things. And we are those soldiers. You are those soldiers. You are the warriors on the front lines each and every day, making a difference. I thank you for that. Paul, if you could, being the guest of honor, just close us out and take us home, I would sure appreciate it.
With just a summing up, you mean?
Yeah, just click.
Yeah. So all I would say, I'd really echo what you're saying, Dan, and that when you are faced with those challenges, is that's when you need to reach into the purpose and find that meaning in the hardship, because the universe is unfair. Bad shit happens to good people. But it's about us just using that to our advantage and helping us to become better versions of ourselves, and equipping us better with being able to deliver our purpose.
Wow. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you to the listeners. And until next time, have a wonderful day. In your case, it's
Namaste.
just beginning. Namaste.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir.